Final hours of the election campaign are now upon us. Party leaders have spent the day dashing around the country to reach as many voters as possible before the polls open tomorrow morning. From London to the Midlands, the Prime Minister has called for a vote for the Conservatives and called it a vote for stability, insisting only she can get a good Brexit deal.
If we lose just 6 seats, the government loses its majority. And that would mean that coalition of chaos with Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP. It would mean Jeremy Corbyn in number 10, John McDonnell at the Treasury. And what a combination that would be. We know they would wreck our economy. And what we also know with Labour is that it's ordinary working people who always pay the price.
Jeremy Corbyn, however, has been framing the election as a choice between hope and fear. Starting in Glasgow and ending the day in Islington, the Labour leader says voters must decide on the type of world they want to live in.
I ask all of you, in the few hours that remain, in the few hours that remain until the polls open tomorrow morning, think very hard. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbours, talk to everyone in the community of the choice before us tomorrow. To me, it's a choice of the kind of world, kind of country we want to live in. It's a choice of this or cuts, closure and privatisation. It's a choice, quite simply, of hope or fear.
Well, I'm joined now by the Conservative former Minister for Trade, Lord Maude, who's now a senior advisor at the law firm Covington. So this has been a terrible Conservative campaign by common consensus for the Conservatives. What could they have done differently?
Well, I mean, when you start with a 20-point lead in the polls, the general rule is don't do anything that is, you've only got downside, so be very careful. I think Roy Jenkins, before the 1997 election, said all Tony Blair had to do was carry this priceless Ming vase across a slippery floor without dropping it. And I don't think Theresa May has dropped it. I think it has had its hiccups. Most campaigns I've been involved with do have hiccups. I was a candidate in 1987.
Oh, yes, the wobble when, yes.
Yeah, where we had quite a difficult campaign, and yet we ended up with a majority of over 100. And so what people remember afterwards is not the campaign. They remember the result, and I would be optimistic that the Conservatives will get a decent majority tomorrow. And I think it's really important that they should, because, this Brexit negotiation is a huge thing for the country and for our partners in Europe. And, if there is any sense that in our counterparts, in those negotiating from the EU side, that the Prime Minister might be pushed off course, that there might be a sense that, if they're just tough enough, they might have another go, another referendum, and reverse it, then all the incentives are for them to be very hard-nosed and make no concessions whatsoever. And yet the right result, both for Britain and for the rest of the EU, is to have a sensible, pragmatic approach that maximises the trading ease, removes friction, continues for it to be a very open and interlinked economy. But for that to be the outcome, Theresa May needs to be able to go in with a strong mandate and a big majority behind her.
Now, you mentioned Brexit there. The OECD has this afternoon warned on the UK's economic prospects in the event of a hard Brexit. I mean, what sort of outcome do you think she's really genuinely capable of obtaining?
Well, we'll have to see. It's not entirely in her gift. It takes two to negotiate. I think she's absolutely right to have said that, a very one-sided bad deal for Britain would be worse than no deal at all. And I hope there's work going on in the government at the moment about preparing it for that, not an outcome anyone wants, but a one that we have to be prepared for, that there is no deal, and, make the best of it. Because, my view was I took no part in the referendum campaign. I thought both sides were talking very exaggerated, making very exaggerated claims.
Say that again, yeah.
And I thought if there's a vote to leave, there is some short-term downside, and that short-term's not over yet. But there's longer-term upside opportunity. But that depends on Britain being a fantastic place to do business. At our best in the last few decades, we've been absolutely the go-to destination for people around the world and companies to put their ideas to work, their money, their energy and their businesses. And we need that do that and double down on that.
But isn't this the problem, though? Theresa May has been perceived during this election campaign as being anti-business, things like a cap on energy prices, for example. I mean, how does she rectify that? I mean, do you think she's as anti-business as people are saying?
No, I don't. I absolutely don't. But I do recognise that there is that perception, and it's a perception that, in the aftermath of the election, needs to be corrected. You know, this Conservative government that I hope it will be needs to send a really unequivocal signal that investment is welcome here, that the government will, over the years ahead, do everything it can through the right tax regime, the right regulatory regime, the right infrastructure, the right training, all of those things to be as supportive of business as it can be. And that's the way you maximise the upside opportunity that there is for Britain, a genuinely global Britain, outward-looking Britain, in the post-Brexit world.
And briefly, George Osborne's Evening Standard today, his editorial says the manifesto had little of substance apart from a series of anti-business measures.
Well, no, I don't think that's fair. I mean, it had a number of things in it, probably rather more than was prudent. But, you know, I mean, this has to be a government that is unequivocally pro-business, in favour of lower taxes. You want this to be a place where people and businesses don't mind paying tax because they feel it's fair and proportionate.
All right.